Erica's going to do roll call. Thank you, Erica.
Crosby Buginigan, here. Here, Connor, here. Jake. Here. Jake, please say your last name.
Heiligenthal.
Hi, say it again.
Heiligenthal.
Heiligenthal. He's here.
It's like Heineken, but Heiligen.
Heiligen.
We're moving on here.
Dale Lesage. Here. The public needs to know. Here. Dale Porter.
Absent.
Absent.
Excuse, sorry.
Here.
Carolyn Simon.
Here.
Craig Kurtz.
Here.
Sherry Winchowski. Expected?
Yeah.
No answers.
As far as I know, yes.
Okay.
Erica, please turn your mic on.
Oh.
We now have to do attendance all over again. Just kidding. Thank you, Vito.
All right, this is an open meeting and is recognized as one. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence, please. Thank you. No citizens' comments, right, Sean?
That's correct.
Okay. Can we get right to student learning?
Okay, so Christine's here tonight. Christine is here really to summarize a year-long curriculum update that we're doing for counseling that we've done for 7-12 counseling. Some of this is going to be a repeat for those of you on the Student Learning Committee, but with the whole group together, we wanted to make sure that she went through everything and also gave you the opportunity to ask any questions. We would like to take this to the full board at the end of May for action item to be adopted, the Character Strong resource. So this would be the last discussion that we would have on this unless the board would like to continue it another month at that point. But we are done with the pilot, and she'll be kind of going through that. In addition, we did get some questions from a board member this weekend and are trying to address those in what she's going to be updating you on also.
All right. Used to using a microphone at our student learning committees. So as Stephanie said, this is just going to be a review for some of you guys who have been on student learning, but I want to take us all the way back to the beginning. So part of our review cycle, at the beginning of our review cycle, we work as a team to come up with a belief statement. So our belief statement, just as a review, is that we believe that teaching skills in a responsible decision-making, personal safety, and pro-social behaviors will assist in nurturing the emotional development and self-concept of all students, leading them to become productive and well-adjusted citizens in the post-secondary world. Students will receive instruction through a variety of classroom lessons, small group counseling, and individual support. To that end, MASD commits to the following. Students will develop a growth mindset through grit and perseverance to become lifelong learners and problem solvers. Students will learn how to use effective communication strategies. As a result, safe and healthy relationships encouraging respect for others will evolve. Students will set goals for themselves, collaborate with others, and learn advocacy skills. And students will understand the impact of their own digital footprint, be aware of the risks and benefits of sharing information, and strive for a healthy media balance. So this next slide is also a review, but it has all of the curriculum documents in for all grades 7 through 12. So if you click on those links, here are each outcome and standard is on here, and then linked in is each lesson that is currently being taught. So I just want to remind you that these documents are available for you. And to a question that was asked, all of our learning outcomes, objectives for the lesson, all of that is tucked in here. Same document that we used K6, actually same document for the most part that we use across the district for curriculum documents. So I just wanted to review that with you guys, I'll share this presentation to make sure that you guys have all the links. Just want to talk a little bit about our objectives for advisory and homeroom lessons, just as a review. So at the high school, we have advisory 1 day a week for 45 minutes. During that time, we do a variety of different activities. So we would have Muck Way lessons that talk about safe and responsible behaviors. Muck Ready, which is really that academic and career planning. We do SEL, which would be that coping strategies, mental health education, emotional regulation. And then we also do some academic learning. So exam prep organizations, sometimes they'll have a time to do some grade checks that they work with their advisory teachers on. At Parkview Middle School, we have homeroom, and that's 4 days a week at 20 minutes. And during that time, we do Mustang Way, which is school expectations. SEL, so an example would be like conflict resolution, and then we also have Flex during that time. And for those of you who aren't aware of or don't know what Flex is, it's a time when they can go seek out other teachers where they need additional support. So a question was asked about what kind of training would there be for staff if they are delivering a lesson based out of Character Strong or a lesson that's been put together for advisory or homeroom. So generally, the objective of the lesson is given ahead of time for teachers to prepare. The directions are provided for delivery, so Character Strong or any other part of the curriculum is given ahead of time. The list is provided of what is needed to prepare. If they need like a specific work that needs to be run, or they need a blank piece of paper and whatever utensil they need for writing. And then after, so at the high school level, the counselors make a video ahead of time and share that with staff so they know how to teach the lesson. Or they would go to a staff meeting and teach it to the entire staff so that the staff know how to teach it in their advisory or homeroom. And the counselors are always available for for questions. So this is our current practice too. So despite whatever resource we're using at that time, this has still been the practice we've been using.
A question was also asked just how much the teachers may interject personal opinions in these lessons. So I did want to remind the board that we do have a board policy that's entitled Controversial Issues, which would not necessarily cover everything that might come up being a controversial issue during these lessons, but it is board policy 2240, and I just took a couple snippets out. One would be in the discussion of any controversial issue in the classroom or in the course of professional duties, a teacher may not express his or her personal opinion. And then that second paragraph basically reminds everybody that if parents do find something objectionable in a lesson, that they would be provided, they could look over the lesson. Once they look over the lesson, if they decide that they want their student excused from that lesson, they could be. In the case of these lessons for SEL, there's no grades attached to this time in advisory, and so they wouldn't necessarily have to make up an alternative learning assignment because there's not a grade attached to it. I guess I would like to remind everyone too that as is the case with human growth and development also, if a topic is brought up that a teacher is not comfortable discussing with students, they do know to say, that's not something that we're going to discuss in this classroom, you can ask your parent at home. And that was brought up quite a bit during the human growth and development as we were bringing in counselors and teachers and things like that.
Okay, the next slide is just going over our steps in the pilot process so far. So we had vendors come in and do reviews and presentations back in November. We've sent communication home to parents, communication home in key news, and then I just put the dates and the times that we've come to student learning with updates, as well as the student learning or the walkthrough access for families, for student learning committee members as well. So just a couple of reminders that teachers will have logins, not students. Lessons will be prepared for teachers by the school counselors, and this is not a change in practice. Just want to remind you guys too that it's a resource we're purchasing, not a curriculum, which means we're not going to be teaching every single lesson that is available. And then furthermore, we choose those lessons. And then just reiterating what Stephanie said, parents always have the right to see lessons taught in any content area. So the pilot included, again, this is a review, but depending on the schedule, they had 2 to 3 lessons in each pilot group for 7th and 8th grade students, about 120 in total. They did handling conflict and perspective taking, and then an advisory, they worked with a class 9 through 12, about 80 students, and the topics are listed below there. So just want to review the feedback one more time. The teacher feedback that we sought. So based on a question, the surveys have already been sent. So this was the result of those surveys. So what did you like about the program? What did you not like about the program? And then any questions you might some pros was appealing. They enjoyed the quote to response for students. All right, so teacher feedback. The format was appealing. They enjoyed the quote at the start. I would say one of the key pieces of feedback we got all the way around was that kids enjoyed getting up and moving during the lesson. Students were engaged, and then the content was appropriate for middle school students. So that was one teacher's piece of feedback. Some wonderings, knowing that our homeroom time is 20 minutes, we would need to modify the length of the lesson, like there would be too much content for 20 minutes. So we would have to slim down and make sure that we're providing a template that sort of encompassed how many minutes or how much time to spend on each aspect of the lesson. That they would need to, they're just not used to the materials yet, so there would have to be some prep. And then at the time when we were doing the pilot, we were given some snow days, and so that did impact our ability to just be able to do as many lessons as we had wanted to. Some student feedback, again, the pros, learning about stress is important. It was engaging, talked and moved instead of sitting. Liked how it was laid out with a start and end format. Everyone was able to participate. Everyone got involved. Felt more focused on what teens are dealing with now. Some wonderings from our students was it was hard to talk to some people they didn't know. I'm not sure if everyone took it seriously. Would I have to share if I didn't want to? That's a fair question. Like what they're currently doing, but would like to do more of what they're doing in small groups. Some other topics we asked them just to provide some additional feedback, whether or not, regardless of whether or not these topics were already taught, we wanted to see if we were missing anything. Other topics that students were focused on were organizational skills, dangers of alcohol and drugs, coping strategies, both healthy and unhealthy, stress and self-worth, and then life after high school. So I just want to go through one more time the access that the community had and then feedback. So we held 2 different sessions. Those are listed up there. And then also, really I would say that gist of the community feedback we got was that they were, community members were concerned that there would be any type of bias or critical race theory embedded in the program. You can read the feedback there. The next question was monitoring and evaluating the program. So we did do staff surveys. We continue to do staff surveys on advisory and homeroom lessons. We look at student engagement survey data from both Parkview and the high school that looks at student connectedness and making sure that students feel like there is somebody that they have a safe person or a trusted adult in the school building. And then we also look at behavioral data. So we would want to be watching, we always watch our behavioral data, but if we're going to change some of the resources that are coming into play, knowing that that delivery is going 7-12 in a 7-12 model, then we would also be watching that behavior data from year to year and also looking at attendance data. All right, so the cost breakdown, you have the total up there. Those are the lessons we would be purchasing. So that's that 7, middle school is, we actually purchased 6, 7, 8. That's how the purchase is, similar to what you said with social studies. Those are just the grade bandwidths that Character Strong sells in. So we had the middle school lessons, the high school lessons, the service course, which is a servant leadership and character development, and then tier 2 solutions, which are small group or individual lessons you can do with students. And then, as Stephanie said, we're looking to bring it to the board on May 22nd for a full vote.
I have a question, Christine. What is this replacing something? You're just adding?
We're adding to it. So currently, our school counselors work every year and read. So we always know we have the advisory and homeroom, so we have the skeleton of that, and then they update lessons every single year. So when we started this process, we didn't have curriculum documents about what we were doing during every homeroom and advisory. So part of this process over the last 3 years has been creating those documents and then making sure that we have appropriate resources to go along with them. Otherwise, essentially, we're asking our counselors to sort of make it up without the guidance of a resource. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
I have a question. So in these surveys that were given to the teachers and the students, were there objective questions to say, because of this lesson, I can now do X, Y, and Z? Were those added in there? Because everything I've seen on the teacher and student feedback is subjective. So is there any objective information that we can get from this to know if it's worth the time and the effort to put into this program?
Not specifically to the question you just said. The question was more based on what did you like, what did you not like? Was there something that you felt was missing?
So is there a plan to add that in the continuous monitoring? Actual
So
objective questions?
That's built into the resource.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I got one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carol.
The feedback that I've heard from some of the high school students, and I think they're all specifically high school, so this not including middle school. Is this on? Yes. Okay. Is there are teachers that do the current counseling lessons, and there's teachers that don't do the current counseling lessons. Therefore, they just kind of sit around and do cell phone time. Because this isn't graded, I'm just wondering the seriousness, and I'm not blaming the teachers because I think the entirety, for me, I have an issue with the time that we spend on all of this anyway with homeroom and advisory, but are they going to follow through with doing this? Because we're going to put money into this, or someone's putting money into this.
I'd like to actually add on to that before you start.
Hang on a second. Were you done?
Well, I'm just wondering, I'm not trying to get any teachers in trouble because I don't blame them, but that's kind of where I struggle. And then I see things from students, this is my last thing, then I'll shift her over, but see things from students that they're not taking it seriously. I think specifically it was the stress one that they did as part of the pilot. I had a student send me a clip of the screen, and it was like a Zen, they're supposed to be like, I don't know, what was it? Breathing, de-stressing. And she said, this was 5 minutes of my morning, and sent it to me. And it's a very super smart kiddo that, is by the book, never had behavioral issues, straight A's, and they're seeing that as a waste of time. So the teachers aren't following through with it. Not all the students, of course, that was one very specific student, but if they're having that going on in their class, I struggle with the.
So as far as the teacher not doing the lesson that's outlined, like that would be something we would need to be made aware of.
Yeah.
And if a teacher isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing during that time, I think that's a separate conversation.
That was basically what I was going to add to it. I have 2 kids in 2 different grades, and both of them, as soon as I saw that, the flex and the homeroom thing, I remember a conversation with them and go, yeah, it's a waste of time in the morning. We don't do anything. We just sit around and play on our phones. Because I think I asked them a question. This was probably a few weeks ago. So that would be my only thing, is if we're going to spend money on something, I don't know how we figure out how we're going to actually use it or get the teachers to use it, but to add on to people that she has talked to, the 2 in my house have both said that they don't do squat in that class or in the beginning of the day, so it might be worth of something looking into to make sure that they are doing it.
Can I jump into that? We do have a committee this summer at the high school to look at flex specifically and to use it for a more academic nature. Now, advisory is where they're doing the career lessons, the SEL lessons, and then flex are the other days a week where they can go get help from teachers and things like that. And we are very specifically looking at this summer with our ACT scores and making sure that we are using that time to the utmost what it should be to make sure that we are getting the most academically out of it also.
What do they, if they don't have anywhere to go during flex, if they're like, I'm good, what do they do?
They can attend a study hall during that time.
So that might be what my kids are talking about, is the difference in the two. They might just be putting it all on the flex time. Like, yeah, we just play on our phones because I got nothing better to do.
I do think when I hear feedback, I think flex and advisory are sometimes all intermingled in what they're saying about the time, what teachers say about the time. But again, the advisory lessons definitely should be taught in their entirety the way that they're supposed to by the teachers. That's a different issue we need to discuss. The flex time then, academically, just simply needs to be used better in the high school.
Yeah.
I was actually going to comment when you said that having 2 high schoolers and one just graduated, that's a very fair feedback, but there's a difference between flex and advisory. So advisory once a week is structured and there are things to do, and I actually think it's very important with the academic and career planning. My kids have had great success using that. So flex is one thing. That really is the student needs to be productive and motivated on their own, or teachers will pull them in. I have one that uses it well and one, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? So like, what are you doing? I'm watching Frozen. Get off your computer. Do you know what I mean? So like,
I might have been confusing the two, so I'm going to,
Yeah.
now that we're talking about it, I'm going to double check on that when I get
Yeah.
home tonight and find out.
check. I think it's important for us to remember advisory is a bunch of different things. And while I have very strong opinions on stress lessons and coping techniques that the world uses for stress, I've also gotten feedback where there's a lot of really good ones. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bath water, remembering that this is only a part of advisory. This is not the entirety of advisory. This is one resource just for the SEL lessons. It has nothing to do with all the other things that we do. So while you may not like all of the things that we do, this is only one part.
How else are we going to measure the success of this program other than just students saying that they like it or teachers saying they like it?
Well, we have part of the assessment components in here, and we'll have to talk more about that as we get, depending on how we move forward. Is there are specific, I would say like impartial statements that students can do at the beginning, middle, and end of a unit.
Student feedback.
We would be using student and teacher feedback because teachers are going to know how it's going over in their classrooms and what kind of level of engagement students are demonstrating.
Are there any other ways that we can measure the success other than just student and teacher feedback, like decreased requests for counseling, decreased behavioral issues? I mean, are we going to look at those things too? I mean, there's a lot of subjective in here and not a lot of objective. I mean, even the goals that were put up at the beginning have no objective measure to them. So I'm just trying to understand how we know if this program is successful or not.
So our behavioral data, I didn't get into this, but to your point, that is qualitative data or quantitative data that we can track. Are we seeing a decrease in office referrals? Are we seeing maybe less stigma associated with going and seeking out a counselor? Are we maybe finding out more information if a student says something during an advisory or homeroom that is then being routed home to a parent and then also routed over to a counselor? Okay. I'm all about accountability, so I think that we can certainly continue the conversation around that.
Anybody else?
Do we need a motion to move it to the full board, or does that already happen?
There's-
Because you said you wanted to bring it, so you're seeking it.
Correct. I do believe that student learning did vote to bring it in May. We just wanted to
That's
do
right.
this
I think we
update.
did. Got it.
Yeah, I believe we did.
With the new board members, we felt it was important to come back.
Agreed.
And just to be clear, Christine, the leadership course that they're planning isn't the same curriculum as this. It's a little different curriculum, correct?
The leadership course would use this as a resource.
Yeah, I spoke to Rick Whitty, who's going to teach the course last week, I think. The board, he'll be bringing his curriculum to be passed officially on July 24th with the new courses in the school. He did say that he would use Character Strong, has in the past at Arrowhead when he taught the course. It was the main resource for the class there, that he would definitely use pieces of it, exactly like what we've talked about a resource would be, the parts that support the leadership class that he wants to use them for, and he would pick and choose what it was. I asked him if the board would not move forward with Character Strong, what would that do to the class? And he said, well, I'd need to take some of the activities that I've used in the past that were provided by Character Strong and probably write them this summer myself.
I think that's a pretty important class that Mr. Whitty's going to teach, the servant leadership stuff. Okay. Anybody else?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Curriculum process, policies.
Yep, so just wanted to go through a couple policies since we're all in the committee of the whole now and not everybody has been on student learning committee. And feel free for those of you that have been on it to jump in also. But we have really 3 policies. I gave you 2, and then as I was prepping for this, I thought, oh, there's one more that I'm gonna mention. They really are about a school board's role in curriculum development. And so this first one, which is policy 2210, simply says that a long policy that says that the school board is responsible for the quality of educational program of schools, and that the school board should ensure that the curriculum is going to be developed, evaluated, and adopted. We call that in education a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Guaranteed basically means that no matter what teacher a student gets, that they're going to be taught a certain level of expectations and objectives and standards, and then viable simply that it can be taught within the time that teachers are provided to teach it, and that we're not handing them something that really can't be done within a school year. The policy then goes through and talks about what curriculum is defined as it talks about the studies, subjects, classes that are offered within a school system. It's the instruction and activities that happen, and the objectives and standards. And then finally that it should accomplish the educational goals of the district. So that's how it defines in the policy curriculum. Goes through a very long list then of things that the state puts out need to happen for curriculum, but I do want to point out that this is the list. Even though there's more detail on some of them, the state really does leave a curriculum very much up to the local community and the board on exactly what that's going to look like. So they do regulate things like we have to follow learning standards, which you adopt every year, that it does need to meet special learning needs of students. It highlights things that it should fit the district's goals and philosophies, that there should be performance standards to it, that it should recognize different talents of students. So it's going to differentiate and provide different things. The policy continues to talk about it should have continuous and learning that goes through K-12. We're going to provide a variety of resources for students that will encourage students to utilize guidance and counseling service. We are told that at the elementary grades we need to provide regular instruction as part of our curriculum on a set group of things. What regular instruction means, they don't provide us. So we could technically teach reading for an hour in first grade, or we could teach reading for 4 hours in first grade. They don't help us by defining that. That's up to us. In grades 5 through 8, there's also a list of regular instruction that needs to happen. Regular usually means that we're doing it on a weekly basis. That's usually what the state defines as regular. In grades 9 through 12, that access now is the term that's used, is provided in those educational programs, so not every student has to take a world language, but that we do have access to that. But we do need to provide regular instruction in a world language in grades 7 and 8. It continues, and then we get down to some minutia that the state has put in. So in grades 5 through 8 and grades 10 through 12, we have to provide instruction on shaken baby syndrome, which happens during our human growth and development units. There is a state statute that regulates that we will teach the Holocaust and other genocides sometime in grades 5 through 8, and then again in grades 9 through 12. Act 31 dictates that we'll do American Indian tribes multiple times in a student's career in school, and then that we'll teach an understanding of culture of different ethnic groups. Again, what that looks like in each district is completely up to us, but that's what's included in the policy regarding that. So as far as what the board then, that gives us curriculum. As far as what the board is responsible for passing and inspecting would be course guides, which is outlined in a very short policy in 2230. A course guide technically will have standards, objectives, assessments, the resources that are used on it. And that is passed by the board. It's what I will bring you in July for our new courses. It's when we do curriculum. We'll be bringing you at some point the K-6 social studies. Once now that we have the resource in McGraw-Hill, we'll bring you that for passing so you can see what happened with those units and what they look like. The policy that I didn't put in here that I should have is our textbook policy, which also outlines that the school board is responsible for looking at and passing, adopting technically the principal resource that's used within a class. So the school board is not responsible for passing every article that's handed out, every worksheet that's handed out, or every reading, but the principal resource, and that boards want to look at the principal resource for maturity level, educational content, and that it is in relation to the curriculum. So just wanted to make sure we went through those.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any questions?
I got one. Just with the other resources that teachers use, what triggers certain things to be sent home for approval? For example, in 5th grade social studies, or I think it was just 5th grade in general, there is like the quick 10-minute news from CNN that I got a letter home asking for approval or not. And I was just wondering, like, what is there a process that teachers go through? Is it something that the principals do, or the teachers submit these
Yeah,
categories?
we also actually look for things that we think could be controversial or resources that for whatever reason maybe, I mean, again, we want to communicate as much as we can with families and parents. And so in the case of that letter in 5th grade, it came about because there were concerns that even though we do believe that that's a good resource for kids that age, that some parents absolutely would not want their kids watching CNN or having that. And so in that case, we want to give an opt-out for it.
But that's just, like, as far as what triggers that, it's just a teacher's common sense knowing that this may or may not be controversial?
Yeah, and then a teacher sometimes, I mean, that teacher will bring that to the grade level. We have cat chairs at the grade level, and they'll bring it to the grade level, and then we'll make that decision. So we, we send letters home on certain books, movies, if we're going to watch them at times, anything that we think might not blanket be accepted by all parents or desired by all parents.
In the past, many times, those would come to the student learning committee, and it would be discussed, and then that would have been the solution to it, was to have the opt-out.
Yeah, I appreciated when I got that. I just didn't know where that.
Or sometimes when we would approve the curriculum, it would be approve the curriculum with this being the situation, that when it gets to this unit, that letter will go home for that.
Okay.
What were the 3 policies? I got 2210, 2230.
The
other
textbook
number.
one, you know what, I didn't write that down. Is there any way I'll get it to you if Sean can't. I don't have it written down, and I do not have them
I'm supposed to-
memorized. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Shawnee, you don't know them all by heart?
I do not, but maybe I should.
I don't either.
Good thing I'm retiring.
So is it the adoption of textbooks?
It is.
It's 2510 if
Thank
you
you.
want to look it up.
2510.
Anybody else? Thank you, Stephanie.
Yep.
School-sponsored publications and productions.
Yep, so that had gone to Student Learning Committee last month. There were just a ton of choices to make in that policy. So we're just bringing it back one more time for any questions before we would look for that policy to be approved as part of our Neola policies. There's nothing, because we're bringing it back a lot, that's controversial about it or we're concerned about it. It was just updates that we made, and there were just a lot of options to
Pretty
it.
riveting reading.
Well, you know.
Any questions on that?
I would make a motion that we move that to the full board as is.
Were you looking
With the
for a motion
updates.
there?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, on that one we are.
Second, anybody?
I'll second it.
Erica with motion, Sherry second. Am I writing this down, Sean, as far as seconding?
I'm writing it down.
Oh, you guys, okay.
I got it.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay.
Okay, the next one, sometimes.
I have a question on that.
Oh, yeah.
So did we just make a motion to go to the full board at a regular board meeting, or did we, because we're all here, is it legal? I don't know.
My motion was to send it to the full board for
And
approval.
that's what I seconded, so so then we don't,
So we actually have to approve it
Approve it.
for action
To
item.
go to
the
the
end of the
full
month.
board, and
Right.
May 22nd, is that
Right.
correct? May
Right.
22nd?
That's correct.
I just wanted to get that figured out.
Okay. Yeah, this whole committee, the whole is a different thing. Anybody else? Stephanie?
Okay, so sometimes as part of Student Learning Committee, we'll just update you on things that are happening in the district that we think you might hear about and allow you to ask any questions or give you the update on that. And so the latest is that section families have been informed recently because of declining numbers in their IPLC setting, which has been in place since 2013, I believe. It was an environment that was originally set up multi-age, so first and second graders, third and fourth graders, and then fifth and sixth graders. And it was at a time that the entire school did not have technology, so a huge part of IPLC when it came in was technology access that other kids did not necessarily have. And then what went with that is some goal setting and some different curriculum that the rest of the school, so it was the IPLC or a very traditional track for students. Over time, same thing happened to the program at Big Bend that I brought Student Learning Committee about a year ago. We have been just seeing a steady decline in the parents that are requesting IPLC. I think there are a ton of reasons for that that are actually very positive for our district, even though I know there are some families that will grieve the loss of IPLC and that environment. But we currently have now Chromebooks or iPads in kindergarten, Chromebooks for all students. We are goal setting in all of our classes. We have curriculum that allows us to differentiate in many places. Another thing that, as they were looking for an identity that IPLC did was inquiry-based science and social studies. We just adopted a new social studies program that is going to be incredibly inquiry-based for all of our students. And so just over time, there were only 12 families that signed up to do IPLC, and we can't continue it with 12 students because it'll make the other two classes very, very large. So families were recently informed, and I just wanted to let you know.
I just have a question on that. So when we put IPLC into place, it had to go through approvals and all, and so I'm just questioning why it wasn't on the radar before the letters went out to the parents, that we would have known ahead of time, because it was such a big deal at the time.
That's a great question, and I think, that was my bad if it needed to be approved. I will take that on. I did not realize that. Secondly, the timeline that was set up would have had student learning finding out about that last Monday, but then we changed the structure of this, And we went ahead with the communication because that was the timeline we had set up, and we had told teachers that we were going to follow that. So
I have another question, and maybe it isn't the time to ask the question. I'm not sure. So, because there were other things that would come to the Student Learning Committee, for example, the situation in our German department. And so I was wondering if those kinds of things are going to be brought here, because it's similar to the IPLC where
So
defining enrollment and
The,
things like that.
the German situation is in executive session.
Okay, thank you.
What's IPLC?
yeah, and individual personalized learning
Community.
community, I think is the acronym that they chose for it.
That's funny. I was actually going to say, maybe you should define ICPLC. But I vaguely remember that we had, did we not set up a certain amount of students that were required to keep it going?
No, that was Eagleville.
No,
think we
I'm
did.
thinking specifically IPLC, because I remember when it was new and we were discussing.
When it was
That
new, when it was new, maybe.
Okay,
You know what I'm saying? In order to get it started.
right. So I guess in my head, it
Right.
was kind of one of these things, like if there aren't enough people, it would be gone. Like that was just how I processed
I mean,
it.
it's not a problem. It's just.
So no action needed.
There's not, I just
Okay.
wanted to update the committee.
Anybody else?
I
Okay.
do also just want to recognize the Bob Slane and the teachers that really built an incredibly well-respected program during the time that it was needed and desired more by families. And so I do want to give a shout out to the teachers that really put a lot of time and effort into making that. This is no reflection on them as teachers. Like I said, it's actually just a good thing that we're offering that to all kids at this point without a specific program for it. Okay, last thing I want to do tonight then, and we're going to be good time-wise, I think, to do it, is I want to do an update also tonight on human growth and development, but with the understanding to get, again, the whole committee as a whole up to speed on some things, but asking absolutely no action. We wanted to do that SEL and Character Strong this month, and then we'll be looking for anything that needs to be action or dug into for human growth and development in June. So this is just the update. I have some resources here from people that have not had a chance to look at the resources, so we can have a much more thorough discussion in June and decide a direction that we want to go in. So, do you have the, thank you. Just to loop everybody in, again, for human growth and development is one of the only curricular areas that we have in the state of Wisconsin that has really specific guidelines to it on how we need to build that curriculum that doesn't involve just teachers. So we did put a community committee together back in July of last summer. We put that together looking for people in key news and put that committee together for interested people that wanted to come for the committee. We met then July 26th, August 9th, August 23rd, September 13th, and September 27th from 5:30 to 7:30. So incredibly dedicated group of people that were coming in the summer to go over things. As part of that, a recommendation came to the board in December. So many of you were here and helped to vote on to pass through what the committee had done as a first layer of recommendations in December, and that we moved the human growth and development lessons from 5th grade to 4th grade because of what's happening to students' bodies earlier. The thought was it would be better. I'm going to give you some feedback on how that went this spring. We moved specifically addressing personal hygiene to 3rd grade in addition to doing it in 4th grade and 5th grade and 6th grade and 7th grade. We reviewed in the December meeting, all instructional materials were adopted that were reviewed for the K-6 curriculum, and then the board gave a 1-year approval for this school year for new materials for the human growth and development because the materials were so incredibly outdated from 7th grade. So to provide you all with updates that were provided to the committee when we met again in April, we have been able to, like the counseling curriculum, We didn't have a lot on paper from the human growth and development curriculum. Teachers had a syllabus and they could tell you what they were teaching, but we didn't have a lot to be transparent with families. And so this process this time has definitely allowed us to put information on our website. We now have information on our website where parents don't need to request to see the presentations that are given or the learning objectives. We just have them on our website. So when letters are sent home for consent, parents are told to go to the website and they can see things on there. And that's been, our district nurses reported to me that's been very welcomed, that they've had people say, thank you for not making us jump through hoops to just see this. We definitely watched very carefully moving the lessons on the body to 4th grade instead of 5th grade, how exactly that went. Our district nurses, I met with them a couple of weeks ago after they were done with, I kept touch with them while they were updating, but then we met a few weeks ago when they were completed with all the 4th grade lessons. Noelle and Tricia felt very, very strongly that the right decision was made to move it from 5th grade to 4th grade. They said that students had more questions still in 4th grade than what even they expected them to have. They didn't know how it would impact that also. They especially reported with girls that there was a lot of fear on what was coming, and a lot of, my older sister told me, my friend or an older student on the bus told me, and they said, that is not what we want. They got a lot of questions and good feedback from families, moms particularly, on 4th graders going home and packing a little bag to be ready, but the girls feeling way better that had happened, that it led to conversations that were good. And so no doubt in Noelle and Trish's mind that movement to 4th grade was very appropriate. So this spring we did lessons to the 4th graders and the 5th graders to make sure that both level of those classes get it, but from this point on we would only do 4th. I would also say the other thing we were anxious to see is if it would lead to more opt-outs, and it did not. They said, I think 2 opt-outs maybe, and that was in line with what we would normally see. Some parents requested the lessons and then said they were very comfortable with what was going to happen in 4th grade. And then we have started looking, the other thing that came out from the committee was that they really wanted to see a resource for 7th grade human growth and development and then 9th grade health when it came to sexuality and what is being taught to students, instead of piecemealing a bunch of resources that get outdated over time or the YouTube videos disappear, which is currently what's been happening. I surveyed quite a few districts in the area to see what resource they used. The districts are also piecemealing things like we have piecemealed things. And so I started a search for a resource and came up with Glencoe, McGraw-Hill Glencoe has 2 booklets. This is just a teen health booklet that's healthy relationships and sexuality for specifically middle school. And then this other one, and again, if you haven't seen copies, I have things here to share. But this, we've always, for 9th grade health, had a health book from Glencoe McGraw-Hill, but then we have had, for the students that are in the sexuality course, and we usually have 1 course of opt-out students, parents that do not want, usually 20-some, low 20s students that end up in that class. But otherwise, they all use the same health book, and then this is used to teach anything from the sexuality. But what we have, because it hasn't been updated in over 10 years, is an old PDF. And so we also looked at this. So I took these originally back in January, I want to say, to the teachers, brought in a group of 7th grade science teachers, which is where this is taught, brought in our health teachers at the high school, and had them take a look at it. In general, they were very pleased with the resource. They felt it very much supported the objectives we already had in place, but they did say it was up to the committee and the board, a few sections that they didn't know exactly how they felt about it either, and really didn't necessarily always want to weigh in, the teachers, on whether or not it needed to be in there, so they kind of left that up to, but they do like the idea of having a resource, and I want to make sure to state that. So then on April 11th, met with the community committee again, brought that in, provided the updates that really I just provided you guys on the good work that's happened since we put that committee together. And then we took about an hour and a half to review these sources and sticky noted them and had a really thorough discussion on what they saw in the book. And so I want to give you their recommendations as you guys lead into taking a look at them too. For the grade 9 book, the positives were that they thought it was good, thorough, and objective information. They thought that it did emphasize universal abstinence like the state statute says we should be doing, that they felt like it was factual based anatomy, and we did have a couple parents who are health workers on there also, but they were pleased with that. They thought that they, again, liked the idea of a resource because they thought it normed what students are being presented. So videos aren't being added or things are not just being thrown in there. And also a good overview of prenatal care, which is, again, part of the state statute for this. They did have some questions, questions being there's a section on safety tips for females. There was a question that they felt like it concentrated a little bit too much on the what potentially could be the victim and the victim being in charge of safety, and instead of, I think somebody had questioned whether or not that would be victim shaming, that if a girl did end up getting raped, would she feel guilty that she hadn't done the steps in there? So just objectively telling you a little bit about the discussion there. Didn't always love the presentation of single parents raising children. So there were some questions there. You'll notice questions, and I'm going to address this in both of them, dealt with the section on masturbation and then gender identity. They did point out that domestic violence wasn't included, which is something that they very strongly feel like should be mentioned to young ladies and boys, that that violence in a relationship is something that should not happen, and make sure that they know where to go, and that's not included. And then they had some questions about the safe surrender messaging. It is a state statute that we need to address giving away a child or being able to go to a fire station and give the child away, and didn't love the messaging necessarily regarding that. Thought we would need to emphasize some things as teachers about that too. The grade 7 then, they liked the first section on total health and wellness. And again, I will share this presentation with you, so as you're looking at resources, if you haven't looked at them already, you can take a look at that. They really liked the consent section. And again, the next 4 really are the same. They felt like there was thorough and objective information. Universal abstinence was emphasized, factual-based anatomy and norms. Then they had questions. They had questions about self-examination. Some liked that section. Others questioned a little bit the inclusion of that in grade 7, the self-examinations. Also had questions regarding masturbation and gender identity, although I do want to give you their conclusions with that. There's, in the 7th grade book, there's information regarding hospice care. So they were questioning that. That's probably something, even if it was in the book, we wouldn't teach. Again, it's a resource. So what we emphasize from that, not that there's anything wrong with the messaging of hospice care, there's just a question of whether 7th grade students care or are mature enough to even have that conversation. So, wanted to pass along with you as we're making, I do believe there are 2 topics that we're going to have discussions on, and I want to remind everybody, one of the things that I like about Glencoe McGraw-Hill is that they are willing to make a book for us, that we could go to them and say, we want this chapter, we want this part of this chapter, we want that chapter. The cost is not prohibitive. So I've been asked that by some board members. I will say it is not prohibitive to doing this because we don't order one of these for every student in a grade level. We would order class sets. They wouldn't take them home. They would have them for the day in the unit, and we would take them back. So I think probably in June, we're gonna have, and you can bring other topics that you see fit, but there's potentially these two topics that we're going to need to discuss. The committee felt very, I'm gonna say strongly, and some of you were there, but I'm gonna use the word strongly, that both of these sections should be included in there. Based on these things. One of the women said, I definitely want a reason if this is taken out, why we would take it out. They were very okay with it being dealt with as a definition. That's something that students could find out about in here. They said, I would much rather that students find out what masturbation is in here than they're running around asking people and learning wrong things about it. And then we did have a couple committee members that said if we're teaching safe sex and we're teaching students not to get pregnant, then masturbation should be a topic that they know exists. If you would have ever told me that I was going to be in front of a group having these conversations, by the way. And then gender identity. There is a chapter in there. If you haven't already looked at these resources, please make sure that you look at it so we can have the discussion in June. But these were some of the comments that came directly from the meeting. That kids are talking about these terms, that we can not want them to, but again, that there is a better, that we are better off teaching them the correct terms just as definitions. Not as a lifestyle, not as something we accept or don't accept, but teaching it through something like this and letting that chapter exist. That it's a disservice to students in today's world to not talk about it in a healthy environment and answer their questions potentially in a healthy environment. They did like the definitions, the way that they were not leaning one way or another. They liked the fact that they felt that this section on diversity taught kids to be kind and respectful to each other, and that's important because some kids do identify this way. That they did use the term birth by biological male or female parts, so that they weren't going down a path of trying to get into really complicated definitions of transgender and where that lands. That's not what the book is doing in this case. One of the teachers said she had a student for the first time this year said, I'm an IVF kid. So is this like, why would people choose IVF? And it could be because same-sex partners are using IVF. Again, better to get information that's accurate. There were definitely concerns of some in the group that we need to not, as a school district, marginalize a whole group, that we can't ignore that it's happening because we don't like it to be happening, that some students are identifying this way. And then a couple of the committee members did use the comment, like we need to tread very lightly. The last statement I put on there is one of the last things that a committee member said. She said, I think we just need to let it exist, be a chapter in the book, not necessarily teach it or preach it, but let it exist. So if kids do have a question on a definition, we could say you can go to this chapter and look at that definition, and that it's providing an accurate definition. So next steps then. I want to remind you as you continue to look at this that we do have an opt-out in grade 7. It ends up being 5 days of lessons the way our current schedule is, so about 5 days of lessons that students can opt out of. In grade 9, we do have a class without sexuality that students can choose to take. I am in conversations in 7th grade about our district nurses also taking over teaching the Human Growth and Development Unit in 7th grade. I'll be very honest, I really like that thought, just because there's 2 district nurses, they're nurses, they have the background, they're with the kids in 4th grade, now we would bring them back in 7th grade. I feel very, very confident that they get incredibly accurate information and medical information that we need students to know at that point, and that is not to say our science teachers are not doing a great job, but if we can get 2 district nurses teaching it versus 4 or 5 science teachers teaching it, I just think there's more control in what information is being provided to students. So Noelle and Trish are kind of looking at schedules with that right now, and I can give you an update in June what they're thinking. a reminder that we can make a specialized book, but I do think we need to have these discussions based on the recommendations of the committee. And then in the end, we'll go back once we know these resources, if they are approved, and write the curriculum. Otherwise, we would look at continuing to piecemeal, I guess, resources together, and we'll have that discussion if that comes about.
Erica.
I'm not going to talk about the content because I know that's next month, but a clarifying question on the grade 9, the class without the sexuality included. So does that mean that that Glencoe softcover book would not be part of that class?
That is correct.
Okay, so I think that's important for us as we're processing over the next month to know that there's a whole class that's available, and I've put my kids in that one, that wouldn't even see that potential book.
So that is correct.
Thank you.
So, Stephanie, I was just thinking, after looking at your slide here, if we want the parents more involved, would an opt-in make these parents do more research in this? Would that solve any problems for us? That at least they would make the parents, they don't want to say, why am I signing this? Just, I don't know, I'm thinking out loud.
I guess I need to think about that.
Okay.
We do both throughout our system for certain things. Definitely something we could look at. I mean, that would not be a difficult tweak to make.
I mean, I realize the committee spent a bunch. How many, Erica? How many, Sherry? How many?
5 meetings?
We've had 6 meetings now.
So you have 10, 12, 14 hours in this whole thing, I'm sure, right?
We do have a couple committee members here. Andrea
And the
Cooper's on the
committee
committee, and Jill Warner's on the committee.
Will you
Carolyn.
send us this PowerPoint?
Yeah, I will definitely
Okay.
share it so you have it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was wondering, so you mentioned a bunch of times that there's things that we have that the teachers have access to, but we're not teaching that, right? So we don't teach this section. Do you personally tell those teachers, do not teach this? Or, so, right now, the reason I ask that is because right now, today, that's how it is. But one teacher goes out, new teacher comes in. Do you take it? Do you take the time to go, we don't teach this stuff in these areas?
It's a great question, and I'm trying to I'm not aware that we have a current resource that we do that with. I think this could potentially be the first resource that we would leave some things in that we want in there to refer kids to, but we wouldn't necessarily do a lesson on. So yes, we would need to move forward talking about that. But I'm not aware of a resource that we have currently in our system where we say you shouldn't teach chapter 5 in that resource.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're pushing the
Yes, we
time
are.
thing. Anybody else?
Please do reach out if you have questions, or I'll make sure you get resources.
By the way, I did read both those books. If you guys should grab one and read it if you haven't.
We get that, Bob?
I have both the digital instructions, because McGraw-Hill did give us it to us digitally, or I have 3 copies of each of these, because the other copies haven't come back. So we might need to trade a little bit during the time if you want a hard copy. Otherwise, I have the digital directions.
What copyright are those? I have a 2022.
So this is right, and I did find out what happened. They sent us, they went back, because I think it was wrong. So let me make sure you have the right one. So this is 2023 for the one that just says,
All right, so this is an old one.
yeah. So we want to actually throw that one out. Yeah, and then the teen health, I
23.
believe, yeah,
That's
is 23, and that's the correct one.
Cool.
Yep.
Anybody else? Are we good?
And if we do need more hard copies, I will call and beg them to give them to us. They've been a little bit, it's hard for them to let go and give those to us because
They think you're stocking up the
I
classroom?
don't know, yeah, but I understand. It's how they make their money, but I can beg one more time if we need more hard copies.
Do we have to, just keep going? Oh, okay.
So it's really up to you guys,
Yeah,
how you want to run this
A
meeting.
3-minute break, and then we'll jump right into
That's fine.
personnel. Is that correct? Personnel?
That's correct. Personnel is next, and again, those times are going to be estimates.
2-minute
and-
break, maybe?
Thank you, no doubt.
Oh.
We'll get that issue addressed for next meeting.
Start time? We need that?
Let's do it.
We can go.
6:38 PM. Do we have to do roll call again?
No.
We never
no.
left.
Stephen? Or Sean, do you want to start with the school?
Ac-
the-
Yeah, if I may, I'll start with the
Yep.
school board meeting start time. So may have been some confusion. If it was my bad, I apologize. But did not understand when we made the motion for the start time of the committee of the whole. We were also talking about the regular school board meeting. And so we should have a discussion about how you want to proceed. Fourth Monday of the month, regular school board meeting. What time do you want those meetings to start? Dale was under the impression it was 5:30, and I missed that. So again, I apologize.
We're raising our hand for 5:30?
No, I'm raising my hand because I want to talk. So this last year, student learning, we had a couple nights or months in a row, we had to start at 5:30, and I remember how much I hated 5:30 because that train rolls through at like 5:25 on Mondays. So it's hard to get here on time. Keep in mind, our district is 90 square miles. So I'm on one far reach corner, and I pick a daughter up from athletics at the high school at 4:45. And I was never able to make it to pick her up, get her home, and get back at 5:30. So I was reminded by that, by a couple emails from community members, my own attempt to try to get here on time, and then the darn train. That was like, 5:30 is rough. I know it might seem nicer to us, but I would like our community to be able to be here and be involved. And if we have people from North Prairie struggling with the same thing that I'm struggling with on the east side of the district, I actually think I would propose and love to see us start both of them at 6. Because we've also had board members confused. Wait, what time is this meeting starting? Wait, what time? And we've come early or we've come late and we've missed it. That I think it would be easier for everyone involved if we had one time. I mean, even our committee and our full board, the last couple of years, committee was at 6, full board was at 7. So people are always like, wait, which one is it? I think it'd be really nice to just have one time and not 5:30.
Sherry?
When I voted for 5:30 for this, I was voting for 7 for the school board meeting because it is a whole community and many people work until 5, and so for them to work until 5, get home, and get here, they couldn't do it. And so now that we've even taken away even having these at 5:30, we're taking away their time to come and talk to us. Because when we had our committee meetings, they would come, right? We had interaction with the community. And so if we're trying to have more community involvement, and so today was my trial. 5:30 is really hard to get here. And as I was coming, I was looking at the traffic and I was looking at the people coming home from work, and it is our traffic time in Mukwonago. So I agree with Erica that, and I didn't know she was going to say that, but I'm like, it would be nice to have them both at, if we have to have them earlier, or if we have to move 7 o'clock earlier, it would be nice to even move this one to 6 and that one to 6 and have them at 6, because I really think we're doing a disservice to our community.
I'm okay with 6 at both. Anybody else?
I'm okay with it.
Yep, I'm okay with it.
So I'll make a motion that both the committee of the whole and the full board meetings moving forward start at 6 p.m. because we have time to change that for the next full board meeting? Or is that too soon? Should we start that in
That one.
June?
So it's entirely up to you.
Okay. So I would say starting this month in May at the next meeting in 2 weeks.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Are we allowed to make a motion and vote on something if we're not?
So I actually wanted to
Okay,
ask that too.
so
Because
so-
plus,
to be clear, and this is a little fuzzy, but technically, you don't need to have a motion for the start of the board meeting.
okay.
You do need to decide when you are going to have your full board meeting. That's something that you have to vote on. So we're required by state law to meet at least once a month. And you guys did that at the last meeting. So you're good that way. It's entirely up to this group of individuals when you want to start those meetings. Now, this is supposed to be a committee of the whole, and in general, at this meeting, you won't be voting. But this time, I did make this a committee of the whole and a board meeting, so you could take a vote, and it's down as an action item if you look at the agenda for meeting start time. So, and you can do that every time if you want, but
How about any more discussion on 6 o'clock for both meetings? Anybody have a problem with that? So we have a motion and a second. Does that mean anything?
and it's down as an action item, so you can vote on it.
All in
Right.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I would like to say that I actually also thought we were only voting for the 5:30 for the committee of the whole. I didn't. So I
Okay.
don't know where the
It-
confusion.
So
it's
6
good to be-
o'clock,
It's good to have a discussion.
6
and be
o'clock is
transparent. 6
moving
p.m.
on.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Stephen?
All right, for appointments, we have 2 program support coordinators. We've got Jamie Dobner for the secondary level and Jennifer Tyson at the elementary level. These are special education program support. And we have Anthony Paul, MHS school counselor, and Jessica Spate, a Parkview Middle School and Eagleville physical education teacher. And we have 1 resignation, Austin Meyer. He is special education teacher at the high school. Just an update.
I'd like to make we're going to move these forward. We're not doing anything, never mind.
Was Jessica Spate
Forward to the
a former student?
Oh, no, we do.
We do.
Motion to move it.
All right, I make a motion that we move this forward to the full board.
Oh, okay.
I'll second.
Discussion? Was Jessica Spade a former student?
Off the top of my head, I do not know, but I can certainly.
So we had Spates attend, but I'm not sure if Jessica is a former student, but we'll find out.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
All right, we have our annual CISA 1 contract that we would want to get approved at the May 22nd board meeting. This is a group that provides services that would be costly to contract individually. And so this group also provides professional development. The total contract cost for this year would be $49,000, and approximately $35,000 would be for our visually impaired students, as well as an orientation and mobility instructor to help with movement through the community, school and home. And so the 2 other costs are a parent consortium and a membership to support personalized learning, but this is very similar to what we had in place last year.
I will make a motion that we move this to the full board.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, I have something. Is this something we could maybe negotiate a little bit? Say, you guys do a great job, but we only can afford $39,000, not $49,000.
We could certainly take a look into it. Part of the thing.
Or is
with-
that being obtuse? You tell me, Stephen.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a problem to ask questions as to how the numbers are determined. At the same time, the benefit of working with CISA is that we do get an opportunity to just contract for the services we need versus trying to bring on somebody like full-time when perhaps we wouldn't need to, but it would be difficult to hire them at anything less than that. But it's still not an unreasonable question to ask.
45? I'm just kidding. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Oh, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I can do the next one.
Oh, sure,
So,
please do.
We're looking at a policy that we have, 5310. It's entitled Health Services. Over a month ago, well over a month ago, we had some community residents reach out. They read the policy. They had some concerns, and we were going to bring it to personnel last month, but we didn't have a personnel committee last month. And so I wanted to bring this policy forward today and just provide some explanation for some of the language. Because if you read it, it could raise some concerns. So, for example, part of the policy states that the school board may require students to submit to periodic health examinations. And then there's some rationale behind that. I want to make sure that everybody understands we're not doing those health examinations. But we do require students at times to get a physical, for example, for athletics. Sometimes a student suffers an injury and they cannot participate in Phi Ed. So we require them to go to the doctor and have a note from the doctor saying their ankle's broken, they can't participate in Phi Ed for 6 weeks. Sometimes we have students that suffer an injury and concussion is probably the best example. Maybe they get injured playing football or soccer or baseball, whatever it might be. They have a concussion, and our trainer might take a look at that athlete, and they rule them out and say, hey, you cannot come back to play soccer until you get a physical clearance from your doctor. So those are some examples where we would be requiring physical examinations. We're not doing the examinations, the doctors are.
That makes sense.
Okay, good. And then the next area of concern is, if you take, again, look at the language, invasive physical examinations. I don't know why they use the term examinations, but we do invasive physical medical procedures. And I think it's good for the board to do that. I'm sorry, to know that, not for you guys to do it. But you should be aware that nurses, health assistants, some of our instructional assistants at times, and even our teachers have to conduct invasive medical procedures such as tube feeding. Other examples are medical injections for like diabetes, rectal medications, trachea suctioning. Those are some, I guess I would consider to be invasive medical procedures. So I met with the district nurses, and they explained this policy better to me, and thus I'm bringing back that explanation to you guys.
That
Okay.
also makes sense.
Thank you, Sean.
Sure. And then one final thing that
Appreciate
I
it.
think you guys are aware, we do require drug screening for our students that are in athletics and students who park in our parking lot at MHS who have a parking pass. And so we do random drug screens, and there's a urine sample that has to be provided. That's not done by our staff, that's done by ProHealth.
Okay. Any discussion?
Anybody with a parking pass?
Ask the question.
Thanks, Sean.
I have a question.
Oh.
Why do we only require drug testing for students in athletics and students who have a parking pass?
So that's a board policy, and I don't have that board policy in front of me, or I can't give you the number either. But that was discussion here at the board, and it's not just student athletes, it's students involved in extracurricular activities.
Okay.
And so in that policy, and I can share that with you tomorrow, it describes which groups of students have to participate in that drug screening.
And it's random, correct?
It's
A
random.
random drug screen.
Right.
And
Mm.
it was a long discussion, but it is anybody like attending a football game? It's not like just the athletes, right?
Does
Am I
Well,
correct?
that's a breathalyzer can be taken at football games, but
football
not a
games.
urination drug sample.
Right, right, yeah, the breathalyzer, that's a little different, and I can bring that policy back next time, and then we can have a discussion.
I mean, I don't remember. Was it band? Was it shop class? Is it anybody involved in extracurricular after-school activities?
Right, it couldn't be a class such as a shop class or
Yep,
or
yep.
necessarily just your band, that would be illegal. You know, we can't prevent kids from participating in those classes
Oh, yeah, yeah.
but the extra activities you can.
Okay. Okay. Elementary class size policy.
Sean looks surprised.
Oh, yeah, that's me too, I'm sorry. So I've attached policy 2312, Guide for Elementary Class Size. And this policy is probably one that you'll be looking at a number of times throughout your time on the board. And it gives the various different thresholds for preferred class size and thresholds for adding a section. So if you have 2 classes of first grade at section elementary, how many students you need to have before you add a 3rd section at section elementary or Rolling Hills or whatever it might be. It also talks about when you reduce. So you go from 3 sections of first grade at Big Bend to 2 sections the next year at Big Bend for 2nd grade. So this is the time of the year that we're finalizing our registrations, approving open enrollment requests. And so this is when we determine how many sections will be at each grade level. And those determinations drive our staffing. And so this year, we have some difficult decisions to make like we do every year. in the past, boards have given us the liberty, the administration, to make some projections, given us some leeway, especially with kindergarten, and that's really the sticking point right now. And so for kindergarten, if you, we would prefer to have 20 to 22 students in our kindergarten classes. When we get to an average of 25, so if we have 2 classes and we have 50 students, we go to a 3rd class once you average 25 in each class. But right now, at some of our schools, we haven't met that threshold. So for example, at Section Elementary, we have 49 students registered for kindergarten. So right now we have 2, we're planning for 2. But if you're okay, we are confident we'll get another student registered over the summer. That will allow us to hit that 50 mark, and we'll add a 3rd section of kindergarten. Gets a little tougher at Prairie View. Prairie View right now we're at 45.
How many do they usually add by the end of summer?
And I wish I could tell you that every year we add 10, or every year we add 7 or 6. We don't. It is completely random. There is no rhyme or reason to it. And
In the
so
last 3 years, how many have we added?
What's the average?
it varies. It
I
varies.
think the last 3 years have been very off, though, too.
Yeah, especially the last 3 years. It varies from school to school. So for whatever reason, I can tell you that Clarendon typically adds more than Big Bend or Prairie View. But I don't have those exact numbers. So it makes a difference because right now at Prairie View, we have 3 kindergarten teachers. If we only have 2 for next year, then we have to find a place for that 3rd kindergarten teacher.
Second question, you're talking about open enrollment. Would you have to tell open enrollment people that there was not space for them in the district? Or would you be able to fill those 5 spots? Or if we had 3 add-ons, have fill those 2 spots with open enrollment students?
So the 45 includes open enrollment students. So what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, if you still have more, I don't want.
No, I'm just looking for your.
So I think section seems like a pretty easy one for me. I would assume we'd get 1 more student over the summer.
I agree.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment. So I'm like, okay, 3 for section. Prairie View, of course, is the sticky one. And I guess my thought behind it is we had a very low year last year with 4K. So we're going to see these lower numbers for kindergarten this next year. Registration currently for this year, however, is pretty high for 4K, so I don't want to see us get stuck in a situation where we're like, oh, it's really low this year, so we got rid of a kindergarten teacher and don't have a spot for her, but most likely we'll need her next year, or him. So I don't want to like move somebody and now they're there and we can't get them back when we will more than likely need them. But I understand that it's sticky.
And the other thing is, with even if you don't add the 3rd, your kindergarten numbers are way high. And so I don't know how anybody at this table feels, but that doesn't necessarily give the best education to our 5K students if those numbers are high. Because you don't split it, those classes are huge.
So the bottom line is this. So I'm confident we'll add a few more at Prairie View. We might not add 5. Are you guys going to be okay? Obviously, I will be gone. Joe will be sitting here. If you end up with 48 or 49 at Prairie View, instead of that 50 with 3 sections, are you going to be able to live with that?
Is this your decision? Did you say we give you the authority to make this decision?
Okay. Yeah, in the past you have. But I thought since we have new board members, I did not want Joe to be put into an awkward position next September because other parents will see that.
Gail, you want to say something? Talk to the microphone, though. You have to talk in the microphone.
Being a kindergarten teacher,
Gail, you have to talk in the microphone. Thank you.
being a kindergarten teacher, I would say you want a smaller class, even if it's, you know, it's just those kids will benefit greatly, and it always works out fine. And I would hate to see you lose a teacher or have to cut, back because of having a big kindergarten class, because it's such a foundational academic and developmental year that way, that I would take it as, if I was that teacher with a smaller class, that's a gift. Because I've had 26 kids in a kindergarten class,
That's a lot.
and you lose a lot. And if you can have 20 or 22 or even a gift of 19 or 18, I mean, I know it's maybe a budget thing, but yet in the long run, it doesn't happen regularly. It's just a fluke. And to lose somebody, I don't know. I'm biased. I've lived that life, and kindergarten is so important that way. I mean, you're for the first grade, and so they need one-on-one as much as possible.
Thanks, Gail. Vito?
Wouldn't we just be moving the one extra teacher from one school to another?
Right, we have vacancies, so no one's going to have to be cut. As a matter of fact, it's too late to reduce staff, to lay off staff. That's guided by state law. That has to be done in April and May, by May 15th, as a matter of fact. So that ship sailed. So we have vacancies, so the kindergarten teacher, if we stayed with 2 sections at Prairie View, there are vacancies, that are spots for that teacher to go.
In the same grade and everything, right?
Not in the same grade, no, not in kindergarten.
Don't we have to add one? Aren't we assuming we're adding one at the other school?
So right now we have, at section,
Oh, there's 3 there already.
we have 3 already.
Okay.
Everybody good?
So the bottom line is, I'm just making sure you're okay with continuing with the administration to have latitude to make those decisions, knowing that next fall, we might fall a little short.
I'm okay with it.
I'm good.
Like Gail said, I mean, a fluke happens every once in a while. I know parents might be upset if all of a sudden their kid is in the 22 class and there is a class of 19 someplace, but if it's a fluke, it's not our policy. Our policies often have to have exceptions.
Blame it on Sean. Next month, 2 months.
How much bigger is the 4K enrollment than the current kindergarten enrollment this year, just so we can forecast the bubble coming through?
So I think when Stephanie gave you an update at the last meeting, the 4K registrations were 30 ahead of where we were last year at this time. 30 students
But is that
more.
ahead of where it looks to me like our 4K has dropped? Did we lose, or 5K, I'm sorry, 5K looks like it's dropped because we usually have
So
more students, or?
the 5K for next year is going to be a little low,
Okay.
and that's because our current 4K class is low.
Okay.
The registrations that
I see
Stephanie
what
was
you're saying,
explaining
yeah.
for next year for 4K we're confident that we're going to rebound, I guess is
Okay.
what we're saying.
Okay.
Because our 4K registrations for next year are ahead of pace where they were last year at this time.
Cool. I'm good with that.
I would say if it's a matter of numbers and it becoming, I mean, I obviously have to listen to what she says as far as what a student, or what Gail says as far as what too many students are. I think if that's the case, I think I would rather adjust the policy than to leave the latitude open. I mean, if we have policies and we're gonna leave them all open for discretion, there's not much point in having policy. But obviously that has to be a thing at some point, but I would, if this isn't one of the really big things, I would like to save that stuff for the most important or the biggest things, where this sounds like something we could just change the policy. We make the numbers a little bit different, so on the high end, it's not as crippling to the teacher. So that's what I think we should, obviously I think we'll go ahead with it now, but it's worth noting when that policy comes up that we probably want to change that one.
Okay. Anybody else? By the way, before we let Sean stop talking, congratulations on your son, Joe. I set a school record in a 2-mile run.
Oh, thanks.
What did he run it in?
9:17.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's a big
thanks.
deal.
Thanks, he was happy.
Stephen ran it in 2:20, I think, once. Am I right, Stephen?
Yeah, 2 hours, 20 minutes.
He's moving fast, so we'll say that. Holy smokes, 9:17, incredible.
All right, Stephen, anything else?
Nope, that's personnel.
Okay, thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Tom Cardhauser, Finance, 7:02 start.
Pretty good.
All right, I'm bringing to you tonight 23-24 proposed school fees. So by and large, mostly unchanged, but we do have a couple changes here. I gave rationale there. I guess I'll leave it at that. Are there questions I can answer?
How did the increase in athletic fees go that we approved last year to this year? How did the school fare with that?
I guess I don't have that information. Can I bring that back to you on the 22nd?
I'll tell you, I made my kid do a second one because I paid for it.
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding. No.
That
But
was
it is,
part of the rationale there.
yeah, exactly.
You're doing it.
I do notice, however, we don't have anything yet on here about extracurricular fees. We talked about that a couple years ago.
Oh, we did,
Still
didn't we?
hasn't shown up yet. So just a gentle reminder.
Okay. Is that something you want me to bring back for?
I don't think it's necessary for this approval.
So I guess in the comparison that I give to other school districts, the very last piece, I do note that there are, other middle school, high school, other middle schools and high schools in other districts that are charging for fees anywhere from 10 to 120. A lot of districts that do that, they are doing that by tiers, based on how big is the clubs. Not all clubs are created equal, not all of them do the same amount of involvement. We could charge if that's something that this board was interested in. I'll follow whatever directive you give me here.
Vito, if you remember this conversation a couple of years ago, we were talking about it because there wasn't really a normalized fee for some of our clubs where Bluetooth, for example, was a very costly expense.
Yes, it is.
That's when this conversation started, if you recall. And then there are other things that are not as expensive, maybe like a choir camp and things like that. So the question in the dialogue became, is there a standard that we need to look at? For athletics, we have this one-time fee, all athletics, but we don't have anything equivalent for our extracurriculars that also cost money. So that's what I'm referring to. I don't see that it needs to be addressed immediately, but.
You want to address it before the school year begins? Do you want to just roll with what we have now and reconsider?
That would be my comfort level. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
What would be your comfort level?
My comfort level is let's just address this, and then if we can get some standardized fee, I don't know how easy that is. It might be impossible to do before school starts, but I would like the discussion to be had.
Okay. I'll bring that back.
Okay.
Other questions that you guys might have? So I guess one thing I do want to note here is that our lunch fees are staying the same. We talked about this last year because the cost, inflationary pressures on purchasing food is certainly there. When we adopt our final budget, the most attention is going to get paid to our operating budget, but we also have a food service budget. During school closures and post-closures, the federal government, United States Department of Agriculture increased when we serve a lunch that meets, federal guidelines about, the nutrition content and food, they give us a reimbursement. And that reimbursement was somewhere in the range of 30 cents for every meal we served. That number went up to like 85 cents. So the amount of revenue we're generating, not just from the families that pay for their lunch, the amount of reimbursement that we're also catching from the federal government is giving us a pretty good balance of funds. Now, federal guidelines say that you can't have more than 3 months of operating expenses as fund balance. So on one hand, you have a part of the government, United States Department of Agriculture, giving you money, and that same people are saying, hey, you got too much money. It's like, well, so we're going to hold the line on food. We're going to continue to do that. We may operate at a deficit because of that, and we do have to reduce our our fund balance in Fund 50, which is food service. So we have some one-time projects we need to address, some dishwashers, equipment for kitchens. So I just want to highlight that when you see that, when we adopt our final budget, why are we at a $400,000 deficit in Fund 50? We have to reduce the balance. We're being told we have to. So we're going to meaningfully do that, but we're going to leave lunch prices left alone. But perhaps next year it might be a different story.
Okay.
I make a motion we approve as submitted. I move it to the full board as submitted.
I second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Architectural firm construction manager selection process.
Sean wrote the memo there, but it outlines what we're currently doing. We issued an RFP last week to a number of construction managers and architects, and we sat through a meeting today. We took questions from them, preliminary questions, and really just laid everything out about the whole process. So they have to respond to the questions laid out in the RFP. We'll evaluate those responses and then pick out 2 finalists from the construction manager pool and the architect pool, and then we'll bring them in for interviews. So, Sean, what do you want to add to that?
So the interview process for the construction manager in the architectural firm will be on June 6th, and we have a team of administrators, including Tom and Andy Wegner. Joe will be a part of that, but we would like a school board member to participate.
Vito, what are you doing June 6th?
I'm going to a meeting.
So we would I shouldn't say prefer. We would like Vito to participate because of your background in that business, and so.
All in favor of veto, say aye.
Aye. I was going to recommend it, but your hand flew up so fast, I didn't even need to.
I want to learn.
And I think it's good to have, we're not looking for more board members, not that we don't value your input, but really we're looking for Vito to participate, obviously because of his background, but also to provide that transparency. You're going to watch the administrative team, you'll be part of that decision-making process, but you can testify to everyone else that we were doing it in a fair manner. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
What time is that meeting, Sean?
I don't think that we've set
Okay.
the times yet, but we're going to get back to all of you guys, let you know when it will be, and we'll make sure that
Do we make a
works.
motion?
I think we all just picked
that was
Vito. I
kind
think
of-
we're
We need a
done.
motion?
No, we don't need a
Okay.
motion at this time.
Okay, moving on.
Thank you.
Budget assumptions, Tom.
All right, so we have to adopt some assumptions here, and I just really want to focus on what do we think our third Friday counts are going to be next year, and how much funding are we going to get. Whatever you choose, I'll build a balanced budget for next year. And so on the second page of what I provided here, I have a whole bunch of assumptions, and I don't think we need to get into all these. I'm going to explain a couple of those when we go into debt defeasance conversation here, but the here and the now is really just focusing on what do we think our third Friday counts are going to look like, and how much money do we think we're going to get from the state via the biennial budget. So we talked about 3 at the Finance Committee last month of 3 full-time equivalent student counts of plus 50, plus 0, and minus 50. I also threw in minus 100 just to help you understand what that might look like. Not that we anticipate that, but given, I think it's important to say here, given the housing market, the prices are high, interest rates are high. The number of move-ins isn't as strong as it once was. Now, this is a temporary economic condition. Things go through cycles all the time. I wouldn't be shocked if we're in a temporarily, this past year we lost 44 FTE. I wouldn't be shocked if we found ourselves in that same boat again one more time until some of these economic conditions ease. So, Sean, go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt. I'm sorry, but at the last meeting, someone had asked, maybe Carolyn, you had asked, the elementary principals had sent out the intent to return forms to our current families, and they said that they came back very strong, that there were very few families that were leaving.
Good to know.
So ultimately, I gave, there's 12 scenarios there between plus 200, plus 275, and plus 350. And then the 4 scenarios there on student growth or decline there. So let's pick something that doesn't give us a whole bunch of money. Like, I don't want to say, hey, we're going to grow by 200 kids and they're going to get $5,000 extra on each kid. That's not realistic, right? So I think we should just pick something here as a group. Alternatively, if y'all just emailed me your choices, I'd take the average of it. But what I would ultimately recommend at this time is that let's go with a declining enrollment for this coming year of -50 and say that's kind of the worst case scenario. And then we'll add $275 per pupil. I think low revenue school districts will do better than that in the state biennial budget process. So I think let's just kind of put a low water mark out there, build a budget that way. If better things happen, we'll figure out what to do at that time.
I like that.
I'm good with that too.
Yes.
All right.
Moving on.
Well,
What is the rumor mill at the state biannual budget discussions?
We don't hang out, the people who write that don't hang out where I hang out, Craig, so I don't really know.
Nick's coming to the next meeting? Nick Redinger?
I'm sorry, what?
Nick Redinger is coming to the next?
Yes, he is, and he said that we gave him a tour of MHS a couple of weeks ago. Had a really good tour with him. I'll let him say he was impressed with the facilities and the programs, but he did say that he'd like to come to the full board meeting, and he would give us a budget update. As far as the rumors, I think that what we're hearing is better than in past years. I think that the legislature, one, is in a better position to fund schools, but not just schools, municipalities. A lot of discussion right now about how much money should be going to the county and to cities and villages. And they're talking definitely more than what's been going on or what's been given in the past. So we're feeling pretty good right now.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess, does somebody want to make a recommendation, make a motion to recommend to the full school board that we assume a budget with -50 FTE and plus 275 funding?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with a third Friday FTE of -50 and per pupil funding of $275.
I'll second.
Any more discussion?
I'm sorry, who had that second, Jake?
I'll get it though.
I was practicing.
All right.
When she's sitting at the train, she's saying Jake's last name.
All right, I guess we're good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Carried. Whatever.
Greg, do you mind if we go to the additional bus cameras next, then we'll come back to the presentation?
I do mind,
Would you?
but
please
I'd
not?
like to make a motion, we go right to the bus cameras.
Thanks for your understanding. All right, so last year in the summertime, we installed cameras on 18 buses. We heard from Dousman Transport about the effectiveness of the cameras. For you school board members who weren't here at the meeting in February when they visited us, we were at Eagleville. When the bus camera comes to a stop, there's a camera that's on the stop arm that extends and it begins to record. So in the event of an illegal passing, we can get a still frame picture of the license plate. And there's also 4 cameras on the interior, so you can see pretty much the entire top-down view of the bus. So if there's an incident on the bus with the kiddos, we can see it, and that has been helpful. It's unanimous from our principals how helpful that has been. So we still have 20 cameras that are not, 20 buses that don't have cameras. When we heard from Dousman in February, there were 80 illegal passings that they were able to record, capture, turn into the police. And when I spoke with them a couple weeks ago, that was up to 105. So we don't have this purchase in our budget, but we do have ample fund balance to do things like this. So if this is something you feel strongly about,
I think it's a safety, it's an absolute safety thing when people are flying around their buses with kids standing there.
I would agree.
I will make a motion that we move this to the full board for approval.
I would second. Can we put
Discussion?
a thing on the back of the bus that says, you know, like when you're in the changing room and it's like, don't shoplift, you're gonna get a bracelet.
Like there's a camera.
Yeah, like we're
Is the
gonna,
bus
we're
equipped
gonna,
with
we're
a
gonna
camera?
get you.
Like in a changing room?
You need a sticker.
Yeah.
Sticker that
Yeah.
says we're watching.
Different.
Okay.
There's not a legality, hey, about having it on there without a sticker?
We can ask.
Dousman, we couldn't buy the magnets and just.
So,
You're
you mean, so the
recorded,
people know that
you're
they're being
recorded,
filmed?
Don't passing buses is a felony. Don't something that says it really big, because I'm sure there's
Just get a thing that says
10%
smile,
of
you're
these
being
people that may not even
Right.
know it's illegal.
I think it's worth looking at. If it's required, it might be helpful, even if it's not required, just to make people think, because I was in Muskego last week where I was shocked. Little kids were being dropped off at a daycare. The bus was in front of a daycare, and 4 cars whipped around that bus. And I also noticed the arm didn't go out, and I was sitting there going, I wonder if there's a camera anywhere on that bus. So anything to keep our kids safe,
Yeah.
I'm willing to.
Okay.
I'll put the magnets on myself if we need to.
Crosby?
I just want to know if the reportings are actually leading to tickets or convictions. Do we know?
Yeah, they are.
They are?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Vito?
Oh, I just put a sign that says smile, you're being recorded on the back of the bus.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it takes.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
All right. All right, so then the last thing that I want to talk to you about now is going to be the prepayment of debt. Now, in the event that Sean show up to the last meeting in June, I got him here now. So, guys, we're going to go on a tertiary presentation here. Sean, I'm dedicating this one to you, big fella. All right? Okay, so all kidding aside here, I'm going to walk through how the rest of the school year is going to play out from a budgetary perspective. What we spend this year, we get reimbursed through equalization aid, so a percentage of the expenses we make now, we get back next year through general aid or equalization aid. Those two terms are interchangeable. So state aid and property taxes are inversely related. If state aid goes up, then taxes come down. If state aid goes down, then taxes go up. So the biennial budget will affect that. How equalization aid is going to work is going to equalize property values throughout the state. So you have a couple hypothetical school districts there with, on the far left-hand side, there's $200,000 of property value available for each student in that district. And then on the far right-hand side, you have a district with $2 million of property value per student in that district. So clearly, you have a school districts with greatly differing values of wealth that's available to pay taxes in that community. Equalization aid, so that's the tax base. So to not let students be at a disadvantage for not having a large tax base, equalization aid is going to ultimately create a formula that says, hey, we're going to make sure that there's equal property values in a formula that they use to distribute the general aid fund. So $5.2 billion gets distributed to all 422 school districts, and it's going to go out according to this formula. Okay, the intent of the formula is to not penalize a kid who's at a property poor district versus a kid who happens to be born and lives in a property wealthy district. So you got your property tax base, then equalization aid is going to fill in the rest. So aid, again, is inversely related. As property values go up, then your equalization aid is going to go down. If your property values are down, then your general aid or equalization aid will go up. So our shared costs, what we'll call shared costs, these are the costs that state government will share with us. They don't share all costs, but they recognize most as shared costs, and what we spend this fiscal year will become aid for us next year. So just gonna, these two values, the shared cost per member and equalized value per member, let's just remember these as we go forward here. So for this purpose, we have 4,833 members in our district, all right? If we defease $6 million of debt right now, tonight, or this month here before the school year ends, we're gonna add $6 million to our shared costs. So we have $58.3 million of shared costs. That works out to about $12,000 of shared costs per member. For our equalized value, we have $4.7 billion of property wealth in this district, so we have an average value of $984,000 of taxable property value for each kid that attends schools in our district. All right, so how this formula works.
My house, but okay.
But if you think about it, if you and your 4 neighbors, Craig, you add up your house values, and if it equals that, if it equals that 984,000, there's 4 or 5 houses available for tax purposes for every 1 student, right?
Got it.
All right, so this formula, I'm gonna whip through this quickly. unless Sean wants me to slow down and enjoys himself a little bit more one last time. So we have 3 levels of aid. There's 3 percentages. So X, Y, and Z is what I'll call them. Every school district has different amounts, and these are predicated upon how much property wealth is available. So the first $1,000, so that bottom tier, the first $1,000 of costs, state government says there's going to be $1.93 million of property value for every student in every district. We have $984,000. So of that $1.9 million amount, we have 51% of what the state government says we should have, and we're missing 49%. So what state government's going to do of that first $1,000 of cost for each student, they're going to pay 49%. Same thing happens at the secondary level. State government, so this is for costs between, and I'll get to this in just a second, for costs between $1,000 and $10,940. I am making assumptions. If you go back to those budget assumptions we made, and there's a laundry list of things, that $10,940 is what's known as the secondary cost ceiling. I'll come back to that in just a second. But state government, that number that I'm setting right there, $1.981 million, state government is going to set that number in the biennial budget so that whatever pot of money they make available, all the dollars get expended and the pot empties, okay? So I'm making an assumption here based on a number of different things here, and this is kind of like my thing I do like to do. It's a sickness, I suppose, but I like to game on getting as close as possible. How much equalization aid are we going to get? And typically we can get close to it. So I'm assuming they're going to set this number to $1.981 million. That's our property value per member in our district. So we have 49.7% of this value. So state government will kick in the other 50.3%. So going back on a per student basis, we get 49% of the primary level, 50.3% of the secondary level. So the tertiary area is where I want you guys to focus on as we go to this third level, okay? So I'm going to say, as we go through this, every school district is either positively or negatively aided at the tertiary level, okay? So state government, this value here is going to be the average statewide value of property wealth throughout the entire state of Wisconsin. If property values have gone up pretty considerably here, that number is going to, that number is easy to predict. We're going to put that at $860,000. That's the average amount of property wealth throughout the entire state of Wisconsin on a per student basis. So we have more than the prescribed amount there at the tertiary level. We're 14.4% higher than what state government's saying. So we have more than they're saying. So actually, we get negatively aided at the tertiary level. So at that tertiary level, we kind of get this negative, if you spend too much or your property values are a certain amount, it actually will eat back into what secondary aid was provided to you. So there's, in a sense, I don't want to say it's a penalty, but the system is designed in a certain way where there's not always an incentive to spend a lot. Or if you have one-time projects, you just have to be mindful of what the impact of that is going to be. If you were to spend a lot of fund balance in a particular year, that's going to shrink your next year's aid. So you just have to be cognizant of that. So for every $1 in tertiary spending, our tax, it costs approximately $1.14 in property taxes. Some districts are negatively aided at 50 or 200%, like very, very wealthy districts on a property value per student basis. 14% isn't, because we're 14.4% higher in property values in this district compared to the average school district, okay? All right, so just walking through this here very quickly as I wrap this up here at the primary ceiling, all right, that $1,000, the first $1,000, we get 49% of those costs back. Multiply that by our 4,833 students, and that's $2.368 million of aid at the primary level. At that secondary cost ceiling, I'm putting that at $10,940. That represents the 90% value of statewide shared cost. We get 50.3% of those costs back, so that's $24.1 million of aid. Our shared costs, if we defease $6 million of debt, will go to $12,000 and change. So for those additional costs there, we actually put $786,000 of aid back into the pot when we do this. Now, if we defease $6 million of debt and saved $1.2 million of future interest costs, that would be a net win. You're putting $800,000 back into the pot, but you're also shaving off $1.2 million of future interest costs. Okay? So the total aid here in this scenario, if we defeased $6 million of debt, is $25.7 million. So these assumptions very quickly, the secondary cost ceiling, that $10,940 value where positive secondary aid turns off and negative tertiary aid turns on. I'm basically looking to what was that ceiling last year and increasing that by 1%, assuming statewide spending goes up about 1% from last year to this year. The secondary guarantee, that amount that state government ultimately puts into the pot, last school year was $5.2 billion. This school year it's $5.4 billion. That percent we get at the secondary level depends on how much are they going to put into this biennial budget. If they put 5.6 or 5.8 billion in there, we're going to get a much greater amount of aid from the government. Our shared costs, I'm assuming that we make a $6 million defeasance here with this math here. So this assumes we spend our budget as proposed and we defease $6 million in debt this month. So total equalization aid, $25.7 million. All right, I'm going to give you, that's a little bit of a decrease from last year. So I'm going to give you a secondary scenario, and I'm going to recommend this one to you, and I'll give you reasons why. If we defease $1.5 million right now, we're going to drop that $53.8 million was much higher in the previous example. It was about $58 million. So we're going to reduce from $6 million of prepayment down to $1.5 million. You'll see our shared costs per member goes down to $11,141. So when we go through this same math, nothing changes there, nothing changes there, but we shrink that negative tertiary aid down from $786,000 in the negative to negative $140. So the total aid here is $26.6 million. Remember, if aid goes up, then taxes can go down. So we just pushed aid up there if we do a smaller amount of debt prepayment. So just walking through this math, I only have one more slide here, so hang with me, guys. If we prepay $6 million, I'm assuming, and we just adopted a budget assumptions of $275 per student and minus 50 on the FTE. Our pot of operating revenue that defines 85% of our dollars is $49.3 million. In that $6 million prepayment scenario, I said our equalization aid would be $25.7 million, so the remaining $23.5 million would be at the operating tax levy. When we get to the final tax levy here, we add our operating tax levy, we add a referendum tax levy, our school resource officer tax levy, and we get to $30.793 million. That number is 0.2% less. This coming tax levy is going to shrink compared to last year's by 0.2%. That's been our long-term stride to really stabilize what property taxes look like to our residents. If we prepaid $1.5 million, we still have the same revenue limit, but equalization aid is higher, and therefore the operating tax levy becomes lower. You can see from the scenario on the left to the one on the right, we go from $23.5 million of an operating tax levy down to $22.9. We start with that $22.9 million operating tax levy. We can increase the referendum levy to $7.9 million at our school resource officers, and we still get to the same outcome. When we do it this way, we're still reducing taxes by 2%, so I'm going to say that I recommend we prepay $1.5 million at this time. What this is going to do is reduce our debt schedule by 1 year. We'll increase the referendum tax levy by $650,000 while still reducing overall taxes. If there's an April 2024 referendum, that's a possibility in your mind. This move here will position the district to build from a larger referendum tax levy this fall as we work forward. So the funds that we currently have to prepay, we could prepay up to $7 million right now. What we would do with those funds is that if you take a look at the screen there, those three small bullet points, we have existing referendum debt that's approximately 2%. If the community votes and the people speak and they want to do a project, we would take out debt in the range of 5.5 to 5.75%. With we would have approximately $10 million next April, where if we did a referendum, we could take that 10 million and dedicate it towards the new debt, because when you have to pay down low interest debt or high interest debt, what do? Pay off high interest debt. In the event that we don't go to referendum or it fails, we take that 10 million we have and we do the $10 million next year. There will be a negative tertiary aid impact at that time. It'll be completely offset and then some by the interest cost that you're eliminating. So I'm recommending to the board right here we should move forward with prepaying $1.5 million of debt. I think it's the best thing for everybody, and if ultimately we don't do a project or it doesn't pass, then we will do defeasance next year.
Do you have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with the $1.5 million of debt prepayment to the full board meeting.
For the tertiary defeasance.
Correct.
I had to say it.
Or the tertiary defeasance.
For the new board members in the room, Craig always has to say tertiary at least 3 times.
I said it for tertiary for the first 3 years. You see that? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? You are going to talk about this Wednesday night at the next listening session at the high school, correct?
Not this particular subject.
Well,
but
kind of. This general
This
thing.
is a part of the conversation, yes.
Going to use that tertiary
No, I
defeasance
won't.
stuff?
They got to come to the Monday meeting to get this.
Okay. Vito?
No, I was just counting.
Oh, got it. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The tertiary motion.
That was your chance.
I think that's,
Right.
yeah, we're ready for,
We'll make a motion that we move into executive session.
Second.
Motion, any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
No, Cherry's got
I gotta do roll.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sherry. Roll call, please.
Crosby? Here. Erica?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Dale? Here. Dale, excuse. Vito?
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Carolyn, sorry. Craig?
Here.
Sherry, yes.